She stood right at the edge of the dock, pointing her phone camera at me like she was about to film an arrest. "You can't be here, this lake belongs to the HOA now," she yelled, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I looked up from the muddy waterline, my boots soaked from a morning of clearing debris, and almost laughed. "Ma'am," I said, trying to stay calm, "I bought this land 3 months ago, deed in my truck." But she wasn't listening. Karen never listened. She waved a thick folder of papers in my face and said, "You're trespassing, this is private community property." Her voice cracked with fake authority, like she'd practiced that line in front of a mirror. Behind her, 2 other HOA board members were watching, whispering, recording, waiting for drama. I glanced at the old lake, the one I'd spent weeks restoring. It had been dried out for years, a forgotten swamp. I drained, cleaned, and rebuilt it myself. I even restocked it with fish for the local kids. But now this woman was claiming it wasn't mine. "You know what's funny?" I said, pulling off my gloves slowly. "When I bought this land, your HOA tried to buy it first. Seller said you backed out because of the taxes." Her smile froze. "That's not true," she snapped. "Oh, I think it is," I said quietly. "And I think you realized how much it's worth now that the lake's full again." Karen stepped closer. "We'll settle this legally, you'll hear from our attorney." I nodded, though my jaw was tight, because what she didn't know was that I'd already heard from theirs. And what I found in that paperwork, it wasn't just about property lines, it was about something the HOA had been hiding for years. That night I couldn't sleep. The sound of frogs by the water mixed with Karen's words echoing in my head, "You'll hear from our attorney." I had a bad feeling, so around midnight I grabbed my flashlight and walked down toward the dock. Something was wrong. The water level looked off. I shined the light across the surface and froze. The new wooden sign I'd installed, "Private Property, No Trespassing," was gone. In its place stood a shiny metal board with the HOA logo welded across it. My heart pounded. They'd come onto my land at night and claimed it again. I walked closer and the beam of my light caught tire marks in the mud, fresh ones. That's when I noticed the reflection of a small red light blinking under the dock. I crouched, brushed away some leaves, and found a camera, a hidden one. I took it back to the cabin, plugged it into my laptop, and waited for it to load. The footage showed exactly what I feared. Karen and 2 HOA members had come with flashlights, drills, and a big metal sign. They were laughing as they put it up. Then one of them pointed at my cabin and said, "He's not gonna last long, we'll push him out like the last guy." The last guy? I leaned closer. There had been someone before me. I checked the old property files again and found a strange note from the county clerk. "Previous owner left under unresolved dispute." That's when I realized this wasn't just about land. This HOA had done this before, and if I didn't act fast, they'd try to erase me too. So the next morning, I didn't call the police. I called someone else, someone Karen would never. When the call connected, a deep voice on the other end said, "Haven't heard from you in years, Captain." I smiled faintly. "I'm not calling as a soldier, Mike, just a landowner with a problem." Mike was an old friend from my unit, now a county sheriff. We served together overseas before he went into law enforcement. If anyone knew how to handle a dirty HOA trying to play legal games, it was him. I sent him the footage from the hidden camera. Within minutes, he called back. "That's criminal trespass, maybe vandalism too, but the real thing you should look at is what they said, push him out like the last guy. You might be sitting on something bigger than just property lines." That same afternoon, his deputies stopped by the HOA office quietly. No warrants yet, just questions. Karen didn't like that. She showed up at my property an hour later, red-faced and furious, holding her phone up like it was a weapon. "You called the cops on me," she shouted. "You think you can scare me with your little army friends." I didn't say a word. I just turned my phone around and played the video, the one where she was drilling that fake HOA sign into my dock. Her expression changed instantly. She tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back. "I told you," I said, keeping my voice calm, "this land isn't yours. You cross that fence again, it's not HOA rules you'll be facing, it's state law." Her eyes narrowed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she hissed. "Neither do you," I said, "because you just messed with someone who knows exactly how to fight back legally and quietly." She left without another word, but I could feel it in my gut she wasn't done. Karen was planning something, and whatever it was going to be loud. 3 days passed quietly, too quietly. The lake shimmered under the morning sun, the air felt still, almost tense. I'd almost convinced myself Karen had backed off until I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A tow truck. I stepped outside just in time to see a man in a reflective vest hooking chains around my pickup. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" I yelled, running over. He barely looked at me. "Order from the HOA, says the vehicle's abandoned on community property." "Community property?" I pointed at the mailbox that clearly had my name on it. "This is my land." Before I could say more, Karen appeared from behind the truck, sunglasses on, arms crossed like she was the queen of the lake. "You can't park on restricted access land, we've issued 3 warnings." I felt my blood boil. "You broke onto my property, stole my signs, planted cameras, and now you're towing my truck." She smirked. "You can argue with the board at our next meeting." "Oh wait, you're not a member." The tow truck started pulling away, my fists clenched, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing control was what she wanted. Then one of her HOA buddies started filming, taunting, "Smile for the camera, trespasser." I turned and walked back to the cabin, jaw tight. Inside, I opened my drawer and pulled out the thick envelope Mike had given me. Inside was a copy of the county property deed and something else he'd found, an old complaint filed by the previous owner. It detailed everything the HOA had done before: threats, property damage, and finally forced eviction through falsified documents. And now they were repeating history with me. But this time, they'd picked the wrong guy to corner. That night, I sat by the lake, the moonlight reflecting off the water I'd worked so hard to restore. Every ripple reminded me of what they'd taken: my peace, my time, my trust. But as angry as I wasn't going to explode, not yet. I had a plan forming, and this time I wasn't just fighting for myself. The next morning I drove to the county recorder's office with all my paperwork: the deed, the camera footage, and the prior owner's complaint. The clerk, an older man named Harris, squinted at the documents inside. "You're not the first to come in here about that HOA," he said quietly. "They've been trying to expand their jurisdiction for years. They submit fake plats, forge boundary maps. They've gotten away with it because nobody had proof." "Well," I said, sliding the USB drive across the counter, "now they do." Later that day, I called Mike again. "You might want to be near your radio tonight," I told him. "I'm sending you something that's going to stir the hornet's nest." He chuckled. "You're not setting any traps, are you?" "Just truth," I said, "and a few hidden cameras." By evening, I'd set up motion sensors around the dock and a hidden trail cam aimed right at the lake's entrance. My gut told me Karen would try to retaliate once she realized her tow stunt didn't scare me. And sure enough, around midnight, headlights cut through the trees. 3 SUVs rolled up. I watched from the dark porch as Karen and her crew got out, flashlights in hand, whispering angrily. One of them carried a metal container. Another had something that looked like a small pump. I whispered to myself, "You're about to make your biggest mistake, Karen." Because what she didn't know was that everything she was about to do, every illegal move, was being recorded from 3 different angles. And by morning, her authority would start crumbling, one lie at a time. At dawn, I woke to the sound of shouting near the dock. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside. The sight almost made me laugh. Karen was standing knee-deep in the mud, yelling at 2 HOA members who were struggling to pull a hose out of the water. The metal container they'd brought was tipped over, leaking some kind of bright green chemical straight into the lake. "What are you doing?" I shouted, running down the hill. Karen spun around, her face pale. "You can't be here, we're treating the water for algae community maintenance." "On my property," I pointed at the clear boundary markers. "That chemical could kill the fish." Before she could argue, a truck rolled up behind me, a sheriff's cruiser. Mike stepped out, slow and steady, sunglasses on. "Morning, folks," he said, voice calm but cold. "Funny thing, we got a report about unauthorized environmental dumping." Karen stammered, "This is a misunderstanding, we were just—" Mike cut her off. "Save it, we have footage, 3 cameras to be exact." Her jaw dropped. "Footage?" I folded my arms. "You really should have checked for security updates before sneaking in again." As the deputies collected the container, one of them whispered to Mike, "This stuff's banned in the state." Mike nodded and turned back to her. "Ma'am, you and your team are coming with us for questioning." Karen's fake authority cracked right there. She looked around like the ground had disappeared under her feet. "You can't arrest me, I'm on the HOA board." Mike smiled slightly. "That's not a legal title, ma'am." The deputies led them away as I stood by the water watching the morning sun spread across the surface. For the first time in weeks, it felt quiet, peaceful. But I knew Karen wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat easily. HOA power like hers ran deep. Money, lawyers, old favors, she'd come back swinging. And I was ready for her. 2 days later, I thought it was finally over. The lake was calm again, the signs were back where they belonged, and the HOA office across town was eerily quiet. But peace never lasts long when Karen's involved. That morning, a man in a suit showed up at my gate holding a thick envelope. "Court order," he said flatly, handing it over. I tore it open and froze. According to the document, my entire property was now under temporary community management by the HOA, signed and stamped by a county judge. "What the hell is this?" I asked. "Seems your ownership is being challenged," he replied. "Effective immediately, all access to the lake is suspended until the hearing." Karen had done it again. Somehow she'd pulled strings at the county level. I could almost hear her smug laughter echoing through the paper. But when I looked closer, something didn't add up. The signature on the judge's order didn't match the one from the county clerk's file Mike gave me. A forged order. She was faking court documents now. I called Mike. "She's gone federal this time," I said, sending him a picture of the document. There was silence on the line for a moment, then he said, "That's felony forgery, man, don't move, I'm on my way." An hour later, Mike arrived with a small team and a federal investigator. They'd already been digging deeper into the HOA's records since the chemical incident. Turns out, Karen and 2 other board members had been forging property transfers for years, selling off community land, pocketing the profits, then bullying new owners until they left. When the investigator unfolded a printed spreadsheet from the HOA's office, one name stood out in bold: Karen Whitmore, treasurer of Lakeview Holdings, LLC. That's when it hit me, this wasn't about the lake, it was about money. She built a private company underneath the HOA's name, using fake authority to steal land across the county. And now, with every fake document, every hidden camera, every lie she told, she'd finally hung herself with her own paperwork. Still, she didn't know what was coming next. Because tomorrow morning, her entire empire would go public on live news. The morning sun rose golden over the lake, calm, silent, almost too perfect. But in town, chaos was about to explode. The local news vans were already parked outside the HOA office, microphones ready, cameras rolling. I stood across the street with Mike and the federal investigator, watching Karen step out of her shiny SUV, still trying to look important in her pastel blazer. She froze when she saw the crowd, reporters, deputies, and even a few angry homeowners holding signs that read "Stop HOA Corruption" and "Our Land, Our Rights." The reporter's voice carried through the noise. "We've just learned that the Lakeview HOA is under investigation for property fraud, illegal dumping, and document forgery, with evidence provided by a local landowner." That was my cue. I walked forward slowly, holding the original property deed in one hand and my phone in the other. The cameras turned toward me. Karen's face went white. "You tried to steal my land," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But this time you messed with the wrong man." She snapped, "This is a setup, he faked everything." Mike stepped in beside me holding up a warrant. "No ma'am, the fakes came from your office." The deputies moved in. Karen started shouting about rights, authority, and her board, but nobody was listening anymore. As they led her to the patrol car, the crowd clapped, slow at first, then louder until it echoed down the street. Later, back at the lake, I stood on the dock again. The water shimmered like glass. For the first time, it felt like peace, real peace. I thought about the veterans who never made it home, about what we fought for: not power, not control, but freedom. And I realized something: sometimes the real battles aren't fought overseas, they're fought in your own backyard. As I looked out over the lake I'd rebuilt, I smiled. I didn't fight for this country just to be told my land isn't mine. Then I stepped off the dock, feeling the morning breeze, knowing one thing for sure: this time, justice had flowed exactly where it belonged.